How do you manage your life with purpose? Now let's ask Otis McGregor. Welcome to the Excellent Executive Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Katrina Burrus, and today we have Otis McGregor. Otis, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me and looking forward to talking with you.
So tell me, your company's called Lead with Tribe and Purpose. So I want to focus on the purpose. And how can you help your clients to find their purpose?
Well, one of the methods that we use, and this is, frankly, my go-to, is I have the client write down 3 to 5 passions. And then what always comes back is, how do I know it's a passion? Well, a passion is something that you spend time doing that you lose track of time. And when you're done doing it, no matter how long you're doing it, you feel energized at the end. Whether it's, woodworking in the garage, coaching a kids team, mowing the lawn, you never know what people's passions are. So if we understand what our passions are, then we can find a common thread in those passions. So what I have them do after they discover their passions is break those passions down into what's the main components of those passions. 3 to 4 things, 3 to 5 things that are components of that activity that is a passion to you. And we find a trend line, which is really interesting. One of my favorites that relates to a lot of people is, you like to go out to the garage and do some woodworking, maybe build some furniture or even just small projects, not even just fancy furniture, just things like that. And then you like to come into the kitchen and cook. Well, you know what that is? That's a process. Both of those are processes that, like instructions, that you can build on and find ways to improve on it, because you don't have to follow, just like in cooking. I know I'm notorious for this. I rarely follow the directions. I do that, and I tend to do that in the garage too when I'm building something. But you find that passion, the trend line that connects all the passions, and that helps lead towards what your purpose is.
So give us an example of how you found your purpose.
Yeah. So mine, after serving in the Army for 25 years, I went into the corporate world for 7 years, worked for 5 different companies. Every one of them, I thought this was going to be it for the next 20 some odd years. And every one of them, 90 days into it, I was like, oh, this ain't right. Something ain't right here. And it was one summer where I'd hit the end of it, and I was sitting here in my home office feeling sorry for myself. I had a great job, worked for a good friend of mine. I was a chief strategy officer, and I just loved what I was doing, but I hated it. I loved it on the outside, and the inside, it just frustrated me. And that afternoon, feeling sorry for myself, I started to wonder, who am I supposed to be? What am I supposed to do? And as I went through this analysis that I just described to you, I realized that my passion at that point was coaching boys high school rugby.
Interesting.
I had just finished up my 7th year of coaching boys high school rugby. And I looked at that and I realized that there was 3 big components to that activity that really I understood and pulled me towards it, that I still enjoy. The game of rugby, the boys, 35 extra sons for my wife and I, in and out of our house. We loved them, still keep in contact with a bunch of them. But it was the act of coaching, challenging those young men to do more than they think they could, holding them accountable for doing what they said, and giving them guidance and teaching and training them to help them achieve their goals. And that's when I realized that's what I was supposed to be doing for others, not just a group of high school boys, but to help other people understand who they are, to challenge them to be who they want to be their true self, live authentically, live with purpose, and pursue their purpose. That was how I discovered it.
Very interesting, yes, because you wouldn't think that, being a coach of rugby for boys and how you took it to a higher level and applied it to what you want to do and your time professionally. So how did you shift from being a strategic officer to knowing your purpose and changing and finding something that gives you purpose?
Well, I tapped into my network. One of the things that we all have whether we realize it or not, is that tribe. And I tapped into my tribe. I wasn't referring to it as that then, but that's what I did. I started to talk to a couple of my friends about it. Said, hey, I'm kind of going through this thing, and I think this is what I need to do. And they said, well, at that point, I'd never even heard of executive coaching or business coaching. And they said, well, have you thought about that? And I'm like, I don't even know what that is. And got introduced, had them, part of my network, introduced me to some other guys at the second and third level of my network that were, to use the LinkedIn metaphor, second and third connections. Bought them cups of coffee, learned how they became successful coaches, learned how they ran their business, and then took off on my own path. I went through the Institute of Professional Excellence in Coaching, the IPEX school with Bruce Schneider, and learned that. Had a great time doing that, got certified as a coach, and decided that's what I wanted to do, and this is who I'm supposed to be. I also decided when I made that commitment, I made one more commitment to myself, and that was to give back to my veteran tribe. Because when I retired from the Army, I had no identity. I had no purpose, no path, other than I just needed a job. And I've always been one of those people that wants to share what I know so that others can learn from my mistakes and my successes. So I started volunteering to coach soon-to-be veterans, active duty service members transitioning out of the military, so that they don't have to fumble through the same path that I did. I refer to it as the wandering the job desert for 7 years and sharing what I know and giving back to that community so those guys and gals can have more success in their life and live with intention.
Wonderful. So you also say life is to be managed, not balanced. So we always say a work-life balance. So what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, there's a heck of a lot more going on in life than just two things. And that's the way I look at it. Everybody talks about work and life balance. But you know what? If you haven't been laid off, if you haven't been fired, if you haven't had a job fall out from underneath you, then maybe you can think about it being balanced. But me, I've gone through all those things, and I realized that there's no separation between work and life. It's all life. And as I started to look at that more, and I did some more reading, and Tony Robbins has a version of this with his planning and his RPM, his rapid planning method, I started to realize it's about managing our life. It's understanding what the categories are in our lives and managing those so that we can prioritize what's important instead of reaction. Because when we're in control of our lives, when we're living with that intention, it's a heck of a lot happier. It's more happy for us. That's a weird way to say it, more happy for us. But we enjoy life a lot more when we do what we want. When we are in charge and we plan it and we do it, as opposed to just reacting. And I can tell you for a fact that there is no wall, no magic wall from the garage into the house when you come home from work or when you leave from work, or the office door, or whatever you want to, whatever metaphor or analogy you want to use for that. It doesn't cleanse you in that moment. It's still there. I don't care whether something bad happened in the office, something bad happened at work. You're about to walk out the door and your dog gets sick all over that really nice rug that you just put down. That's going to carry over into the office. So how do we realize that it's all life? When we realize it's all life, then we start to understand that we can manage it and control it and be intentional and have those categories that we can manage.
Okay, so now you need to give it an example, because when you assume balance is that the work and the home life or the personal should be about the same. It should be balanced, but you say it should be managed. So give us an example how you manage it versus balancing it.
Sure. Well, I'll just use mine as an example. I have 6 categories in my life that I manage. I'll be real open and vulnerable with you here.
Great. I love that.
What those categories are, because I'm passionate about them. And I smile every time I describe them, because that's what we want them to do. We don't want some dry title. So number 1 is legacy leader. And for me, that's how I'm helping people become better leaders in their life and in their tribes. Number 2 is adventure guide. And that's when I'm helping those soon to be veterans create their next adventure in life, giving back to them and helping them create an adventure for themselves. Number 3 is patriarch of love. And that is spending time with my family, my wife, my friends, giving them focus and not being worried about other things. So that's the 3rd category in my life. My 4th one is connector for success. I love having people in my tribe work together and finding out that Scott does this retreat. And then I've got my other friend, Catherine, who runs retreats, and putting them together so that Scott's retreats can be so much more powerful and successful. It's also what I refer to when I go and I network with people and meet new people. My 5th category is badass Green Beret, because I was a Green Beret. And I like to remind myself that, yeah, I used to be a badass.
Okay. Just 1 minute,
Yeah.
Otis. Badass, those are Europeans and foreigners that are listening. First, please define badass, and Green Beret, please define that as well.
Yeah. So badass, tough guy, and not just a guy, and women too, they can just bear through anything, right? There's nothing going to stop them, nothing physical, nothing environmental. Focus, get the job done. Green Beret is Special Forces. It's the U.S. Army Special Forces. Yeah, that's the best way to describe them. I hope that helps.
Yes, I'm sure it does.
Okay. So that's a category which covers my health and fitness, taking care of myself physically and just enjoying doing it. Because every time I say that, I smile because it reminds me that, you know what? Yeah, I used to be, and I still am for who I am today. And then the last one is project builder. And like I mentioned earlier about projects in the garage and things like that. Well, you know what? We all have those things that we do in life, whether it's a garden, fixing things around the house or the apartment, or a hobby that maybe it's working on cars or whatever. That's the project builder. So those are my categories of life that I look at and I manage each week. And I prioritize, shift things around. What's more important? I really need to focus on my health because it's lagged the last couple of weeks because of various things going on, whether getting sick or having to really put some extra effort into things around the office or whatever. So that's how I look at it. Those are my categories. And you notice each of them if you hear my tone shift a little bit, each of them pull me towards it. They're not dry like introduce people or coach people. They're titles, they're words that I enjoy saying, that every time I say them, every time I look at them on my goal card, the corners of my mouth turn up because it excites me and pulls me towards them.
So finding your passion, putting categories where your passion, your energy is, and then if you overdo one of those categories, with time you rebalance it and pay attention to the other categories. Like you said, if you haven't done your exercise or you haven't taken care of yourself physically or you're sick, well, then you'll pay more attention to that to make sure that comes up and is a healthy situation. But that was done at the expense of another category. So after you feel better, you reprioritize your time. Did I understand that correctly?
Exactly. Yep. You hit the nail on the head right there.
Okay. So that's managing your time. So you find out what your passion, like you said, you ask your clients to write down 3 or 5 passions, try to find what is the main component, the tread line through it all, right? Mm-hmm. And then you go through that tread line and see, like you said, and managing it instead of balancing it, that work and life is all life, really. And how you manage it is to see what are the categories for your life that are important to you, that energize you. And if one is off balance a week, the next week you balance it out by focusing on other aspects that you have ignored because of a reason.
Well, I was going to say, I think if I understand what you're saying, is where does purpose fit in there, right? Well, purpose is the umbrella overarching umbrella of your life categories. So all your life categories in some form or fashion support your fulfillment of your purpose. That's how it all fits together. I like to think of purpose as being never accomplished, but fulfilled. Like we create a vision for who we want to be, where and what we want to be in the future. We can achieve our vision, and our vision underlies and supports our purpose, and our purpose can only be fulfilled, not achieved. And then under our vision is where our goals, our life categories support our accomplishment of our vision, which supports our fulfillment of our purpose. Nicely
said, Otis.
Thank
you. So how long have you been coaching?
About 4.5 years, 4 years, 4+ years. We'll call it 4+ years. Yeah.
Great. And you also have a podcast. Tell us a little bit about your podcast and what's the mission of it?
Yeah, it's called the Cam and Otis Show. And the mission is to share stories of entrepreneurs and leaders and how they overcame obstacles or how they won, how they did that right, And we love when our guests share stories about trials and tribulations and successes in their business and in their life. It's a lot of fun. I do it with my youngest son, Camden, thus the name, the Cam and Otis Show. And we love sharing those stories with our audience because there's a lot of great lessons out there that, if you can learn from somebody else, that way you don't make the same mistakes, or you can leap ahead in where you are in life and not have to figure it out over 5 years. You can get it done in a year.
Wonderful. So I encourage the listeners to go check it out. Thank you very much, Otis. And tell us where we can get a hold of you.
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn at Otis McGregor. Our website is tribe-purpose.com. And you can also sign up for my weekly newsletter, Monday Moments, that I do the same thing. I have a Stoic quote, and then it's something I learned. I like to share my lessons, and that's one of the ways I do it on a recurring basis. It's something I learned this week to share with you next week so you can kick your week off.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Excellent Executive Coaching Podcast. You can subscribe to all future podcasts at excellentexecutivecoaching.com. Join us each Wednesday to learn more about the latest trends in leadership techniques and bring your coaching to the next level. To learn more about Dr. Burrus' CEO Mastermind, use the contact form at excellentexecutivecoaching.com.